It's kind of a similar story here in Europe. Let's turn now to Catherine Bennett. It's time for business. The numbers here too are in regarding the third quarter.
They are, and the Eurozone, this is the fastest rate of expansion since records began in 1995. But the record is almost meaningless because, of course, of this current context. The Eurozone saw a jump in GDP of 12.7% in the July-September period. Now, that's compared to the previous quarter. But GDP was still 4.3% smaller than it was before the pandemic. So we haven't yet recouped the loss in output caused by the coronavirus. These numbers, of course, refer to the summer, when the virus had died down a bit and consumers were travelling and spending money. But this fresh wave of restrictions across the Eurozone could pull the region back into contraction in the final quarter of the year. We saw similar record numbers in the US this week, but these jumps are more an indication of just how deep the economy fell this year than an indication of strong and permanent growth. Well, it's day one of a second lockdown here in France, and French bookshops are asking the government to be considered essential services so that they can stay open. It feels even more urgent now with the Christmas shopping season fast approaching and the online retail giant Amazon eating up more and more of the market share in the country. Caris Garland has more on this story.
This Parisian bookstore isn't considered an essential business, but its door is still open. The shop has put in place a click-and-collect system, hoping to survive France's second lockdown.
On a beaucoup de commandes, on a beaucoup de gens qui hier nous demandaient est-ce que vous allez faire le click and collect, est-ce qu'on pourra venir chercher des livres. Manifestement, l'offre culturelle, c'est quelque chose qui est très important. Donc, tant mieux pour nous, et puis à nous ensuite d'honorer ça.
Bookshop owners say the number of customers continued to increase after France came out of its first lockdown in May. It's a promising trend, but online retailers like Amazon continue to pose a threat. The company is leading e-commerce in France. The president of the Traders Confederation of France has urged people to wait to see if independent stores will be allowed to open before making purchases.
J'ai demandé au ministre de nous aider à demander aux Français d'attendre la réouverture des magasins indépendants, des magasins tout court dans les centres-villes, et de ne pas aller directement chez Amazon dans les grandes surfaces.
Amazon's net income for the third quarter tripled from the same time last year, with the pandemic encouraging customers to spend big online. It made $6.3 billion between July and September. That's more than $2.8 million per hour.
Now let's take a look at global markets. European indices mostly lower on Friday, following losses on Wall Street overnight. The FTSE was down just under the flat line, the DAX also slipping 0.33%, and the CAC 40 up 0.5%. Wall Street, meanwhile, is heading for its worst week since March after a robust day of trading yesterday. Stocks plunged, led by tech shares on the Nasdaq, which fell more than 2.5%. The Dow Jones dropped 1.33%, and the S&P 500 also slipped 1.7%. Now for some of today's business headlines. New travel restrictions and lockdowns in Europe are weighing on airlines. Air France KLM said on Friday that it will reduce planned flights for the rest of the year and warned investors that its earnings would fall even further. Shares in the airline are down more than 70% this year because of the crisis. Huawei has been knocked from the top spot as the world's biggest smartphone maker, after only being crowned with that title in the second quarter of the year. Samsung has overtaken it with 80.2 million shipments, against Huawei's 50.9 million. Huawei is feeling the effect of US sanctions across international markets, but also closer to home, where it saw a 15% fall in shipments in China in the third quarter. The UK's data privacy watchdog has fined the Marriott Hotels chain £18.4 million, that's 20.4 million euros, for failing to keep customers' personal data safe. The fine actually refers to a cyber attack at the hotel chain in 2014, but that was only discovered 4 years later. That cyber attack put the personal information of around 339 million guests globally at risk. And the timing could not be worse. Berlin's Brandenburg Airport will finally open tomorrow, and perhaps the date is appropriate because it's a bit of a Halloween nightmare. It's opening almost a decade behind schedule and has gone more than 3 times over budget, to the tune of 4 billion euros. But that's not even the biggest problem. It's opening in the middle of a pandemic when global tourism and aviation industries are in crisis. This airport is going to have to ask for more funding to get it through the rest of the year, even though a third of its financing has already come from German taxpayers' pockets. And it's starting off with huge debts to repay, before even one passenger has stepped foot in the terminal. Just a bit embarrassing for Berlin there.
I'll miss Tegel.
Yeah, well, quite.
Anyway, Catherine Bennett, many thanks. We'll have more business news for you later on, including the closing word on Wall Street. It's